Hello, friends. I am the Reverend Terry Peterson, minister of St. John's in Guruk. Today is Saturday, the 3rd of April. It is the 40th day in the season of Lent, the last day. The 40th object in our Faith in 40 Objects is the curtains, or perhaps you have blinds like this, but whatever the case, today's object is window coverings, the kind that you can draw over and keep out the outside. On the Saturday after Jesus died, that's exactly what his disciples did. They went home and they kept the Sabbath. They drew the curtains and they stayed in, keeping the world out there out, because frankly, it was too much. They'd had enough, more than enough. And sometimes, especially when you've had a big loss, what you really need is to just stay in and be with it, right? To shut out the world and try to make sense of things inside. And so that's why we have our curtains or our blinds today. That's a thing I think a lot of us can relate to, especially this year when we have, it feels like, had to draw the curtains against the world and stay in our homes. But we also, of course, are opening them, constantly looking out, desperate for the chance to go out there. But sometimes you look out and you think, I wish I could go somewhere. And honestly, it's too much. Like, the longing is too much. And so you have to close over the curtains and shut out the world and just be. And that's really what Saturday after Good Friday is about. All of the things that can be done are done. The horror is both past and just beginning, as with any grief journey. The details are not all attended to, but as many as could be attended to were, right? Like the funeral is finished and now it's just them in the house, curtains closed, door locked, waiting. And they, of course, had no idea what they were waiting for. They assumed they were waiting for the end of the Sabbath so that they could finish the funeral details. They assumed that they were waiting for enough healing of their broken hearts that they could go about their lives. We know that we're waiting for something quite different in addition to all of those things. But they didn't know that at first. They just drew the curtains shut and waited. I've been thinking about that reality of how much we need and want to close the curtains sometimes, and also how much we need and want to open them sometimes, and that the feelings that accompany that desire are sometimes similar, actually, whether you want to close or open, but it just depends on a lot of different factors about how you're feeling and what's going on, and even the weather and what sort of house you live in and who is there with you, as well as all sorts of other things that might come up for you from your own past. And this is a day when we close over the curtains and we sit with that past. We sit with the story as we know it, and we let the mystery of God's presence in the midst of grief be as real as we can. And sometimes feeling God's presence in the midst of grief, when you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, sometimes you do have to close the curtains because the world's too bright. However, I also notice that in the Good Friday story, something that perhaps the disciples didn't realize yet because of where they were, right? Most of the male disciples had scattered away before this happened. The women stood at a distance from the cross so they could see what was happening, but they also could observe without being tied too closely so that they would not be in danger. And then they saw where Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus as well, they saw where he buried. They saw where he buried him. So they were around, but none of them would have been in the temple at this moment. So remember, it tells us in Luke chapter 23, verse 44 and 45, it was about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m, while the sun's light failed, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. The curtain of the temple that kept God in the holy place and that kept us out of the holy place. The curtain that was drawn so that God and humanity would not look one another full in the face. That curtain was torn in two. So I've been thinking about that, and also these curtains that sometimes, just like the disciples, we need to close around us, and how God opened them. God opened that curtain and said, like, we're in this together. There's no separation between us. God and the world are together. God is always in the world. And we who are sometimes rightfully and sometimes not rightfully hiding behind our closed curtains, we are meant to be where God is. Now, we all know God is everywhere, just as much in our homes as anywhere else. That's part of what the curtain tearing tells us. But that also tells us that God didn't want to be confined in the temple building any more than God can be confined in a church building or in a book or in a single way of thinking or a single understanding of something, a single tradition, a single place, a single person, any of it. God is not confined to any of that. So if we're going to follow the Spirit, we need to be ready when God tears the temple curtain again. And that's going to look like rolling back the stone. But we're not there yet, but almost, right? When the stone is rolled back and the last barrier between God and humanity is torn down and defeated, will we be ready? Will we be ready to open up the curtains and go out and let the world in and, open the windows to the fresh air and be prepared to be a breath of fresh air to a world that doesn't believe any of this is possible? That's the question of Holy Saturday. So it has been a joy and a delight to be with you each day in the season of Lent, to look at the things of our homes and see the possibilities of understanding our faith more deeply through them. So thank you for going on this journey around the house with me. I hope you have a beautiful Easter, and I will see you again soon. Until then, peace be with you.